Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
You are listening to Women's Running Stories, the podcast where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences. Welcome. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast, and I am so glad that you are here. In this episode, you are going to hear the story of Sarah Pardus. And Sarah is a runner living in Boston whose journey with the sport has spanned most of her life. And running has shown up in many different and sometimes surprising ways. Her journey is truly a testament to how the relationship with running can shift over time, and also how it can be a path to learning lessons that impact not only running life, but all of life, which you are about to hear. That's why I am so excited to share this story. And up top here, I do want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank Rochelle Solomon and Kate Yenrick for their help with this episode. Rochelle was featured on the Roads to Boston series on this podcast back when it was called Strides Forward. And in addition to being a runner, Rochelle is also really involved in the Boston area running community. And that includes being a volunteer for Girls on the Run, which is an incredible organization. In brief, Girls on the Run is a nonprofit. They have chapters throughout the United States. And one of the main things they do is provide coaching programs for young girls. And the final goal of each program is to run a 5K. And throughout the process, girls participate in lots of different activities that help teach them valuable lessons in areas like confidence and empowerment and communication. They do terrific work. And adults can volunteer for lots of different roles. You can become a coach, or you can become a buddy runner. That's someone who pairs up with one of the girls who's gone through the program and runs with her during her 5K and encourages her. So these are just some of the ways that people can get involved and provide support to these young runners. And a while back, Rochelle suggested to me to do an episode that highlighted Girls on the Run, which I was all for. So she helped get me in touch with Kate, who is the community and engagement manager for Girls on the Run in the greater Boston area. And Kate connected me with Sarah. So yes, a big thank you to both of those women for everything that they do in the running community, and also for their help bringing Sarah's story to me. And as you will hear, indeed, Girls on the Run features prominently in Sarah's story, going all the way back to the start of her running experiences. And it continues up through today, including with her most recent running milestone. A couple details to know before you hear Sarah's story. She does mention Grandma's, and this is the very popular Grandma's Marathon, which takes place each year in Duluth, Minnesota. She's also going to talk about qualifying for the Boston Marathon and cutoff times. And I just want to add some clarity around this, just in case you are not familiar with all the details of getting into the Boston Marathon. To get into Boston, there are 2 primary ways that people do it. One is they qualify. This means that somebody runs a marathon within a certain qualifying time. The other way people get in is by raising money for charity. Now, the other thing about qualifying on time is that most of the time these days, making the time standard pretty much does not guarantee that you're going to get into the race, because there are a limited number of spots in the marathon, and typically there are not enough spots for everybody who qualifies. So they fill up the race with the fastest qualifiers first until the race is full, and that determines a cutoff time, or the amount of time that you had to have run your marathon faster than the qualifying time in order to actually get into the race. Typically, the cutoff time is a couple of minutes faster than the qualifying time. So if a runner runs a marathon, say 3 or 4 minutes faster than the Boston qualifying time, they can feel pretty certain that that time will get them into the Boston Marathon as a qualifier. But nobody ever knows what the cutoff time is going to be until all of the entries are in. So you submit your time and then you just hope that it's fast enough to get you in that year. For 2024, the cutoff time was especially stiff. It was 5 minutes and 29 seconds. And that does become important to Sarah. One final thing I do want to mention before we dive in is that Sarah did struggle with an eating disorder when she was younger, and she talks about it quite a bit in her story. She also talks about her path to health. All right, so let's get to it. Let's hear Sarah's story, starting with her first experiences in running. Here to tell her story is Sarah Pardus.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that was pretty involved in running. My mom really loved to run. I remember her running every day. And so I guess at some point she decided to enroll me in Girls in the Run. I was a really quiet, super shy kid. And so it was a really great program for me to do a lot of those activities that were designed to help raise confidence in a young girl. And I remember that all of the activities were centered around like life skills. And so running was that mechanism. But I remember us playing games or doing laps around the field and collecting popsicle sticks that they would say, do a lap and then like write down what something you love about yourself. Or we would play a game of like freeze tag and you would tag somebody else and say something nice about them. And I do remember a lot of the games being like having built-in lessons, I would say. And I do remember a lot of that. And like I said, I was super, super shy when I was a kid. So I'm sure like I don't remember all of a sudden coming out of my like comfort zone or like not being shy anymore. But I'm sure that it did make a big impact on building some of that self-confidence back then. And I do remember doing that final 5K with my mom. I actually found a news article for it. And there was a quote in the newspaper from me that just said, "It was hard. It was fun though." And so I do remember really enjoying running, and it could be the influence of my family that like we always did turkey trots and things like that. So yeah, I remember enjoying the program. I remember having a lot of friends that did it with me. I remember it being fun and liking to run for long periods of time. I was that kid in gym class that really didn't enjoy gym except for when it was time to run laps around the field and collect the popsicle sticks and do the mile. If there was like dodgeball involved, forget it. But any of the things that allowed me to just run for long periods of time, I really enjoyed. And I would say a lot of that probably stemmed from Girls in the Run, making it a fun activity versus something that you're doing as punishment, like a lot of other sports make running out to be. Yeah, so I think Girls in the Run, I believe I did that for a few different seasons. I know at least 2 years of it. And then I think I did some of the, like my family would make, or my parents would make me do the turkey trot every year on Thanksgiving. And I do remember some resistance there, not wanting to do it all the time. And so it was definitely a part of my life, but I wouldn't say I was like, I love running, this is my thing. I was actually a big swimmer. I swam starting around 7 or 8 years old competitively through halfway through college. And so I started really getting back into running in high school as a way to gain that competitive edge. I was taking swimming really seriously. I really wanted to swim in college and like find that competitive edge against my teammates and other teams in meets. And so I joined the cross country and track season or teams in the off season for swimming, so that I was building some of that endurance and speed, and that I enjoyed it. I would say I wouldn't say I really fell in love with it until college. Yeah, I would say in between high school and college, I started to really start running on my own for fun. But yeah, high school is when it kind of took off. And both through high school and college, the primary motivation for running was was swimming and getting better at swimming. Yeah, so when I was a senior in high school, I was having some pain in my foot swimming specifically, and I ended up having foot surgery, which took me out of the last like month or so of the swim season. And I remember for some reason, and I don't remember exactly why, it might have been like an offhand comment from another friend who had surgery or something, but something made me go, oh my gosh, I'm going to get out of shape if I can't exercise for the next however long, or I need to make sure that I'm like eating super healthy and staying active going into this surgery so that I don't gain a lot of weight or like get out of shape when I'm in a boot for 6 weeks or whatever it was. It was a pretty minor surgery. I don't remember why that even really crossed my mind or what started it, but I do remember that having that surgery coming up, it was just like I wanted to be healthier and wanted to be healthy, and it ended up spiraling into a full-blown eating disorder over like the last 4 months of my high school career. So yeah, so I had I was dealing with the eating disorder on and off for quite a few years. I would say I was in like a pretty dark place for a year and a half, I would say. So end of high school through the first year of college. After high school, I grew up in a really competitive town. It was just like competitive is the best way to describe it. And it wasn't the best environment for me. So I ended up moving to Rhode Island where our sailboat was and living on the boat for the summer by myself in like after my senior year of high school. And while I was down there, it was really helpful just to get out of the environment that I had like ended up in that situation. But the bigger thing I think that really helped was I found this nutritionist or a dietitian who was really incredible. She really understood the way that my brain worked and was willing to work with me. And so it was less about like, I had seen a couple of dietitians in my hometown that were like, food is medicine and sometimes you have to eat things you don't like. I am a very picky eater. I have been since I was born. I eat a lot of foods that kids would eat, like pizza and hamburgers and chicken nuggets and things like that. And so having a dietitian at the time tell me you need to eat X amount of calories per day and you need to eat these things like peanut butter that you don't like just didn't work for me. And so when I moved to Rhode Island and found this dietitian, she just challenged me to try something new every single week between our appointments. And that thing could be having a slice of cake at a restaurant, which obviously I've had a slice of cake before, but she made it almost fun. And then it became like, you need to have a milkshake every day. Well, I loved milkshakes. And so having a dietitian like that was less numbers focused and more focused on the emotional components of things was really helpful for me. And at the time, I also really wanted to swim in college. And my mom and my pediatrician basically said to me, if you don't gain X amount of weight by the time the summer is over, then we're not signing the papers for you to go swim. And for me, that was enough to at least show them that I was trying and that I was making progress. And so by the end of the summer, I don't think I had actually gotten to the point where I had met their goal, but I had showed that I was trying. I showed that I was making progress. And so they did let me go and swim. And when I got to college, my swim team was amazing. And the girls that were my best friends had such healthy relationships with food that they were really supportive of me, and being around them helped me with like making sure I was eating, and my coach was great. And so I was surrounded by people that provided a really like safe environment for me. And I still struggled throughout that freshman year of college with it on and off. But overall, like my teammates would be like, oh, if I didn't eat a lot at dinner, they wouldn't say, oh, you didn't eat enough at dinner. Instead, they'd be like, hey, let's go get a milkshake like after we're done with our homework tonight. And that really helped. So it honestly, the main motivation for me was swimming at the time and getting through that. Or I guess not getting through that, it was swimming, and my sole focus was my doctor won't let me swim if I don't get through this and figure this out. And that was enough for me to kind of at least start turning a corner. So when I was in college, freshman year, I had a lot of success, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to, like, I wanted to make nationals and break records, and those were all within reach for me at the time. And I wanted to continue building that momentum. And so I ended up walking onto the track team at the end of freshman year in college and competed with them for the few months or whatever. And I did enjoy it. I saw some success there. I didn't really mesh as well with the team necessarily because I was, my identity was still heavily, I was a swimmer and I was running to help me with swimming. And so I think I started to enjoy those like long runs more and more while I was at practices with teammates. I didn't really enjoy the meets or the track workouts, but those days that we just went and ran for an hour were great. In the summer, I went back to living on my sailboat, and my coach had given us these like packets for the summer with workouts that we could do that were swimming related, but running was an alternative option. And I ended up running a lot those summers while I was in Rhode Island, and I loved it. And so I'd come back to swimming or back to school for the year, and sophomore year was ready to go. I had worked really hard on my relationship with food between freshman and sophomore year. And then sophomore year, early in the season, I was doing a flip turn on the wall and my knee popped, and I didn't know what happened at the time. It was really painful. And I got an MRI and it was inconclusive, but it looked like it was potentially a torn meniscus, and it hurt to swim, but running didn't hurt. And so that sophomore year season, we had scheduled surgery for me at the end of the year to go in and try to figure out what was going on and fix the problem. But instead of getting in the pool every day for practice, I would go out for a run. And then at the end of the season, I had the surgery and there was actually nothing wrong with my knee. And so it didn't fix the problem. And it was a big blow because I had all these big dreams for myself with swimming, and I was getting burnt out because of the injury and just getting frustrated. And so I think after that, I kind of just decided that I was burnt out. I had been competing for, 16 years of my life at a pretty high level, like just a lot of hours dedicated to the pool. And I wasn't enjoying it anymore in the same way that I was enjoying running. And so I ended up quitting swimming that year or that season. And then I was already on the track team for the spring seasons, but I went to my coach and said, I've quit swimming, so I'm going to join the cross country team and do indoor track. So then I became a 3-season track runner after that. And junior year, so I ran track 3 seasons, and I didn't love it. I didn't love the meets. I wasn't a super like gritty track competitor. I wasn't seeing that same success I had seen freshman year. And at the end of the season, I just wasn't enjoying it. I hadn't meshed with that team as well as I had with the swim team. I think in general, especially with running, there is a lot of disordered eating that's present. And I was still, I would say like I was relatively recovered, but I was still like, it was triggering to me to be around people who were likely also struggling with some disordered eating. So I still identified heavily with the swim team, even though I was running full time. So my senior year, I ended up actually leaving collegiate athletics altogether and started running like longer distances. I started working at a running store and fell in love with like half marathons and just road racing. And that really kind of kicked off that passion.
Sarah had left collegiate sports behind and focused her athletic life on road running, where her competitive spirit shifted. Unlike when she was racing as a swimmer and her focus was on beating her competition, with road running, it became more about focusing on her own efforts and getting faster. In other words, she started competing against herself. This shift to running and racing outside of the college system also opened Sarah up to finding new people to train with, including the hugely popular fitness community, the November Project.
When I first discovered November Project, I actually really was like, this is not for me. I had seen things about it in Runner's World. I had seen stuff on Twitter about it. I was living in Baltimore at the time. I was still in college, and they had just started one in Baltimore. I think I ended up discovering it like one of the first couple weeks. And so finally I was like, fine, I will give this a try. I don't think I'm going to like it. It's more like of a CrossFit vibe to me than just going for a run. And it wasn't the workouts that I really fell in love with. It was like having a community of people who understood me, especially at that time being in college. I've never been someone who has been a big partier. I never really drank alcohol. I'm like a go to bed early, get up early kind of person. And so I think like finding these people who most of them were in their early 20s, fresh out of school. So I was a little bit younger, but finding people who had these similar interests and lifestyle habits to me was really helpful. And seeing these people like live this healthy lifestyle just because they wanted to, I think really helped a lot. And I don't think there was anything super specific that helped me take that final push past having this eating disorder, other than just being surrounded by people who had like healthy relationships with exercise and lived a healthy lifestyle that I wanted to be living and was trying to live. So a lot of them were runners on the side. And so it kind of morphed into having running friends. But the actual like November Project workouts at the very beginning, I was like, I don't want to do burpees. And like a 30-minute workout is like nothing to me. This is just not my thing. But I kept going back and I got really ingrained in that community for a few years in Baltimore before I moved to Boston. And then moving to Boston, I had a group of friends waiting for me, essentially. I was pretty close with the Baltimore leadership team because it was so small when I started that they actually told the Boston leaders that I was coming, and they kind of pulled me into their community. And I made most of my friends in Boston I met through November Project. My boyfriend, who I've been with for 5 years now, we met through November Project. So it was a huge part of my life. I don't go all that often anymore, but I would say like the effects of it are still heavily influencing like my life today, because that's where most of my friends have been from.
Sarah found a fitness community she meshed with at the November Project, and through that, new running friends. And in time, Sarah reset her focus on a goal that had been on her mind since college.
I ended up flying home in 2014 to go watch the marathon with my aunt, who lived in Boston at the time. And I remember like going and taking part in all the Boston marathon activities that weekend and saying like, I'm going to run Boston one day. Like I'm going to be the one crossing this finish line one day. And my coach at the time when I was running cross country and track had said to all of us, something along the lines of like, your body's not fully developed until I think it was like 23 or something like that. And so in my head, I told myself, okay, I can't run a marathon until I'm 23. I had started dabbling in the half marathon distance. I think seeing Boston probably inspired me in some way to want to move up to that marathon distance and really to want to run Boston. So in 2015, I was 23, I believe. And I said, okay, now I'm going to run a marathon. And Rhode Island is like my happy place. It's where I credit a lot of that recovery from an eating disorder. It's my favorite place to be. I've run the Newport half marathon a whole bunch of times. It was my first or second half that I did. And I decided that Newport was going to be my first marathon. And at the time I was like, cool, I'm going to qualify for Boston. It's going to be easy. No big deal. And so that kind of kicked off this marathon journey, I would say, where 2015, I ran that marathon and did not qualify for Boston. I massively blew up around mile 18 because I went out too hard. And I was far too optimistic about how I would feel later in the race. And it kind of started this like hunger to claw my way to qualifying. And took a decade to get there. And then this past year, I finally was able to run Boston.
After 10 years of training to run a marathon fast enough to qualify for Boston, Sarah did at last succeed in running under the Boston qualifying time. She had BQ'd, and she ran Boston for the very first time this year, 2024. But that did not transpire the way you might be thinking it did, which Sarah is going to get into. But before that, over the last decade, Sarah's marathon training brought to light two important lessons that have contributed to improving her wellness. And that these particular lessons came through marathon training is kind of surprising. First, Sarah learned the fine art of actually training less to perform and feel better.
I was always injured in college, I would say, when I was running. I never had stress fractures, but I had a lot of soft tissue, aches, pains, things that would keep me from running for long periods of time, like a month, a couple weeks at least. And it was kind of an endless cycle where, okay, I can't run and I'm desperate to get back to running, but I'll just cross train instead. And I would then I'll go to the gym and do the elliptical or whatever it was, feeling really uncomfortable with the idea of taking rest days. And then when I started training for marathons, I started loosely following marathon training plans. And I was never someone who ran 7 days a week. I did have some limits on my body, but I would struggle on those days that I wasn't running. And my body definitely just does better running 4 to 5 days a week. And so I think marathon training made me feel more comfortable with those days that I wasn't running, doing nothing, if that's what I needed to do. Like at least one of those non-running days needed to be a total rest day. And marathon training made me more comfortable with that because it was part of the training. And I think that my mindset kind of flipped at that point where I was like, okay, I actually have to take this rest day so that I can run hard on my track workout day. Whereas in the past, when I was just running aimlessly for the fun of it, and I wasn't doing any kind of structured training. It was just, how far do I feel like running today? I typically ran 6 to 8 miles a day, 4 or 5 days a week, I would say 5 days a week on average. And at the time, there was no reason that like on those rest days, I needed to actually rest. So I would try to fill in the gaps with yoga or spinning or something. Whereas with marathon training, I actually needed that break, and I felt a lot better when I did it. And for some reason, that made my brain be like, okay, like this is part of the training versus you're just doing nothing today.
So marathon training taught Sarah the importance of rest. And this, in turn, helped her finally iron out the intertwined and complex relationship she'd had between running, fitness, performance, and disordered eating.
I would say I started running after I had that foot surgery in high school. I had started walking and then progressed into running. And back then I was really heavily struggling with a full-blown eating disorder. And so I don't know that it started in the healthiest of ways, but I think doing it, like I just felt like it was a way to clear my head, and that side of it was really healthy. And so it was a struggle for a long time where I enjoyed it for healthy reasons, and I wasn't really doing it because I wanted to lose weight or anything like that necessarily. But it also is a really slippery slope into that addictive, like having a pretty addictive personality. It's hard to separate the two, I think. And so I would do it because I enjoyed it, but I also at the time was probably doing it partially because like of that addiction side of things, where it's like you feel like you have to, and if you don't, you're gonna get out of shape or something. And I don't know. I think over time I evolved into a much healthier relationship. I think once I started marathon training, I started to really take those rest days and feel comfortable and excited for the rest days because I was working so hard during the actual training. And I think that really helped kind of reset that relationship. But it definitely, I would say that my relationship with running didn't necessarily start in the healthiest way, although in a weird way, it also is what helped me like finally move past the eating disorder side of my life.
Sarah's running life has changed a lot over the years, and running has played a large role in her becoming healthier. And Sarah has never forgotten where it all started with Girls on the Run, which over the years she has continued to be involved with.
In junior year of college, we had the opportunity, or our coach came to us and said, hey, Girls on the Run is looking for some buddy runners for their 5K. And so a couple girls on my team and I went and acted as buddy runners for these girls. And it was super fun. And it was so cool to see them have that experience and tell us that they weren't going to, like, they were too tired and they needed to walk, or they couldn't do the whole 5K. And then they did, of course. And I just remember really loving that experience. And so after I ended up leaving track and cross country, and I was working at a local running store in Baltimore, for some reason, I guess I wanted to fill my time. And I had remembered loving that experience as a buddy runner so much. And obviously as a girl doing it at 8 or 9 years old. So I found a local chapter and decided to take part coaching. And it was a lot of fun to watch these girls who started like having never run before, like work through the program to the point where they were running those 5Ks. And some of them were really quiet like I was as a kid, and some were really chatty and needed to be reined in a bit to let the quieter ones talk. But it was really fun to see them complete a lot of the exercises and activities to help them build that self-confidence and really integrate running in a healthy way into their lives. In general, I have just always looked at it as really fondly as a program, because I do credit that for kicking off my running journey and then like participating in it and helping these girls. Like, I love running and I want to spread that, but I also, as someone who has struggled with eating disorders and things like that over my life, I do want to be able to like be that healthy role model for girls, because it is a pivotal age when the body image issues can start to come up and self-confidence and things like that. And it is something that, like, I still struggle with self-confidence now in my 30s. So if I can be a little bit of, or leave any kind of impact on them, then that's really powerful to me.
Ultimately, Sarah's involvement with Girls on the Run became integral to her Boston Marathon journey, and in a way that she didn't anticipate.
Yeah, for whatever the reason, confidence has always been a struggle, but I've never not been confident in my ability to qualify for Boston, for better or for worse. I would say I probably was overconfident quite a few times, where I would go into the race and would go out way too fast thinking, oh, this feels easy. And I would really pay the consequences later on. So it took a long time. I ran, I guess Boston this past spring was my 7th marathon. So it took 6 attempts. And every single time I'd get a little bit closer. And quite a few of those times I would miss it by like a minute, or they had just lowered the cutoff time by 5 minutes one of the years. So I missed it that year as well. And then this past year I ran Grandma's, and I did qualify by 4.5 minutes. And it felt like all of those years of work had built on themselves to get to that moment. And at the time I was like, this is amazing. I'm 4.5 minutes under the cutoff time. There's no way that I'm not getting in. And then in September, the times came out and I found out that I had missed it by about a minute because so many people had applied. And so that's when I decided to run with Girls on the Run, which felt like it kind of came full circle for me, because I felt like I had earned that spot through qualifying. And it was unfortunate that I didn't actually get in. But because Girls on the Run had given me that start, it felt like a charity that I really could truly put myself behind and feel good about asking people to support me. And everybody was so happy to support me in that journey because they had watched me try and fail so many times to get to the point where I could run Boston. But they also, a lot of my family at least, had been there when I started with Girls in the Run and had been there like every step of the way and were heavily involved as well. So it really was like a true victory lap for me, even though it wasn't necessarily the like, I'm still going to fight. I'm still going to try to qualify for Boston and get in like through qualifying. But it was a really, like, I'm so glad that it worked out that I was able to run with Girls in the Run for this marathon, which happened to be the 10-year anniversary of the year that I decided I wanted to run Boston one day. So it just felt like it truly did come full circle for me.
Sarah's running journey has come full circle. I mean, what a beautiful way to achieve this goal of running the Boston Marathon. She hit her qualifying time goal with 4.5 minutes to spare, but when that ended up not being what she needed to get into the race, she decided to run for a charity, raising money for Girls on the Run. And that does bring us to the end of Sarah's story on the podcast. A big thank you to Sarah for coming on the podcast and sharing her story. Thank you so much, Sarah, and all the best in whatever comes next. And thank you once again to Kate and Rochelle for helping make this episode possible. Please look to the show notes for a link to how you can follow Sarah Pardus on social media, as well as a link to Girls on the Run. I will also link to the series that Rochelle is featured in on this podcast, the Roads to Boston series. And that does bring me to the end of this episode. Thank you once again for being here. I always appreciate you listening. And I would love it if you would share this episode or the podcast as a whole with someone who you know would appreciate these stories too. Word of mouth recommendations are really helpful for women's running stories. All right, that does it for me this week. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. And until next Tuesday, I do wish you healthy, joyful strides forward.
Women's running. Women's running stories.
Welcome to Easy Conversations, a podcast about covering the incredible human ability to overcoming adversity. I am Furkan Dania. I am a therapist and mental health advocate. Each week, my objective is to sit down with a guest and share their story of how they were able to find meaning and purpose through their adversity. These are conversations that we have deemed to be difficult, but they don't have to. Together, we can find a shared understanding. This is a podcast for everyone.